On today's episode of the Shade Table, there are the four sororities of the Divine Nine, the Zetas, AKAs, Deltas, and Sigmas. Each sorority has a history, and we're here to listen to the stories of the women and their colorism experiences.
Hello, ladies. How are you today?
Hello.
Okay, so today's discussion is over colorism amongst women, but specifically within sororities. So, colorism is a topic that affects women the most. And so, we have one or two representatives for the four sororities in the Divine Nine. You have the Deltas, the Sigmas, a Zeta, and the AKAs. So, women in general can relate to other women in the struggles that we go through, right? So, we are always met with specific beauty standards seen in the media, misogynistic views for men who think that women can be better than them or just as good as them, and the overall pressure to just meet all of the standards that society has put out for us. So, within our own community, we also bear things that women of our own skin color or ethnicity bash us or put us down for any reason that they see fit, and that includes skin color. So, as Black women, do you find yourself feeding into these skin tone stereotypes or bashing other women?
As far as for myself, skin tone is not an area that I really play into. Now, I do have to be honest as far as bashing, and I feel my mom and I talk about going to the airport. One of the best things is people watching, and so if people watching, I am judging. So I'm guilty of that. And as I'm being more self-reflective, I do understand that it's something I do. So within my sorority, if somebody's not doing something right, or I feel like they're not carrying the ideals of the founders, I do have a group of people I feel comfortable with saying different things. And it's not so much maybe that person, kind of what they do. But I have been guilty of bashing, if you use the term that you used.
I would have to say, for me, I don't think I've ever gotten into colorism. I just genuinely love people of color. Do I feel like it's happened to me before? Yes. Do I feel like it's happened to me from African American women? Absolutely. And so that's kind of like the hardest thing to deal with, because for me, I genuinely feel like we are all sisters. I've never ever played into, I don't like, she's dark skinned, she's light skinned. I've never, if I see a woman, I feel like she's beautiful, I'll say that. I don't like, and I think just in growth, I used to say, oh, you are so pretty, your skin is so dark, it's so, beautiful. I really didn't mean anything by it. I just thought that her skin was beautiful, or if she was light, her skin, maybe because she didn't have any blemishes or just different things that we've all dealt with before. But it was never ever, coming from me, a personal attack. But then I realized that it could have been. And so now I just simply say, hey, you're beautiful. Hey, you're pretty. And just to make sure that I'm not trying to make anybody feel in a negative way. Just I'm giving them a compliment, but then they take it as a negative, like, oh, so I'm pretty because I'm dark. No, I think you're beautiful just but I love your skin tone. It's just that for me.
My grandmother was really fair skinned and my mom was really dark. And her siblings varied. And so I really didn't know the difference between the color. So I'm not sure if I've engaged in the bashing thing, because in my family, we're all different colors. And so again, I really didn't know or see color. Go to family reunions, we have white family members, African family members, African American. So I really, growing up and even as an adult, didn't think twice about the different skin tones.
Just going off of that, my mom is very light skinned, and our family ranges just in different shades, and I feel like we're all beautiful. But personally, like, I don't engage in like bashing or anything. But just as a darker skinned woman, I do notice that there are less dark and brown skinned women that are in movies. That's just a known fact, that it does kind of hit a little bit whenever I'm back at school. I'm trying to pick out makeup from counters, and they don't have my skin tone, listed out. So it's like, okay, well, that hits.
And for everything she just said, it makes me more cognizant. So I don't find myself bashing, but I find myself probably prejudging someone because I want to protect my child.
Mm.
And so, if I think back to myself as growing up as a child, I was the lightest person in my family and probably still am, from grandmother to, and so I never, to everyone else's point, I never felt it because they probably felt the need to protect me. And, there are instances where the outside world has come in, but no, I'm always on guard. And having a child of a browner perspective, browner complexion, it puts you on guard. It really does, to make sure that she's protected.
So, you all stated that in your family the skin color varies. Like you have whites, Africans, African Americans. So usually when you see that, you still get some form of colorism, but you said that you didn't. So can you elaborate on that more?
I guess I wasn't raised that way. One story in particular, I was with my grandmother's store, and a kid walked up and he asked my grandmother, could he touch her skin? And he was told, it's a little white boy, and he was told that if you touch a black person, that it would rub off on you. And so that was my first time ever experiencing any type of prejudice, racism, anything like that. Maybe I was sheltered, maybe I was protected, or maybe I just didn't pay attention. But, she said, sure. I mean, she was lighter than you. She could really go for a white lady. She had really long, flowing, beautiful hair. But I knew all I knew is that she was black. That's all I knew, is that she was black. So I never thought about light or dark or anything like that. It could have been I was just sheltered. But I didn't know the difference, I guess, because I was around every shade. I didn't know I was dark. I never thought about it. You're light, you're dark, because I was around all shades. We were just black people living in a city with mostly white people. Yeah, was raised in a city with mostly white people, so we all stuck together type of thing. There was no light, dark. It was more like who has more money. You didn't see shades, you saw economic.
The one story when you talked about your family that stuck out with me, and first of all, I'm the only child, but my grandmother had 4 children, and I see this, and I have 2 daughters, and their skins they have the same father, but their skin tones are different. But I try to make sure that they stay connected because my mom and my aunt are so far from each other. But I realized that it came from growing up. My aunt is very high yellow, and they call her the yellow banana, and they call my mom the black rattlesnake. And so, because there was some favoritism, they're in their 50s, they still fight, because of that. And I just had this conversation with my mom. I was like, you do that. Your mom is dead and gone. And I don't know where it came from, the names, because I was a child. But you guys have let that control you all's relationship now. And it has affected me because when they fight, then they pull me in the middle. But I don't think they realize their fight isn't really about them, but it was about how they were raised and they've been pitted towards each other. And so now I have to tell my daughters, that's not how you're going to. So I definitely never talk about, and it is, my other daughter's hair texture is different from the other daughter. And I have 3 children that have the same father, but they all have the same father, but they're just different. But I never say, hey, X, Y, and Z. I say, your sisters, this is what it is, we're family. But it's hard because when you hear that, you're like, you did that as family to each other? This is not even outside, this is family. And now they're grown women with issues because they were little girls that experienced that from inside their family and then outside their family. I still hear people say that now, and I'm just like, that's so ignorant. I don't understand it. And so for me, as like you said, I feel like I have to protect my children from hearing that so that they don't start with each other, feeding into it. Because I tell them, when I'm gone, you guys need each other.
Well, I can say that growing up, I was in a black neighborhood, went to black schools. I didn't go to a mixed school really until I went to Purdue. And that was as an adult with children.
So I didn't realize what that meant. I knew what it meant because you've been around, you watch TV. I'm from Mississippi, so I knew what that meant just because of that. But I always knew it was great. I knew it was wonderful. Everybody in my school thought it was wonderful and great. And then I realized that other people had an idea of what colorism meant. Because although I'm smart enough to know what it meant, I hadn't faced it. And so, you know, when I was at school, the difference was in sorority life, light skin versus dark skin. I've been dark all my life, so I don't know anything else. But you mean I'm not great? I mean, what does it mean? I'm not great. You know, you don't fit the model. You don't fit. You know, of course, they don't tell you that. You just know that. You know, so I experienced it from that vantage point that my sisters thought I'm not great because I'm too dark, or not smart enough because I'm dark, or you don't have the same kind of intelligence because you're dark. You know, so my girls and my son, they're dark. So their names growing up were beautiful and gorgeous. They never heard me call them basically by their name, but they were in trouble because in our home and in our life, in our world, you're beautiful and you're real dark. Right. You know, and so in my younger daughter, and the transition from a little girl to middle school was like the awkward kind of phase that girls go through, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, we got to do something." And her siblings would say things to her, and we're all dark, and they would say things because although we like to say that color doesn't mean anything or it doesn't make a difference, even in our own communities, sometimes it does make a difference, or we perceive something different based on a person's skin color, and that's unfortunate. And if the large community does it, in our own communities, unfortunately, sometimes we're guilty of it.
And that's what makes it difficult. Growing up, I had a first cousin, and she was a lot darker than me. And people used to make differences in us because even though I consider myself dark, I was lighter than her. And so, and I hear people say, that's why you're black. And I just thought black was black, you know, and to this day, she still has self-esteem problems. And we're in our 40s and we still compare ourselves to one another, you know, based on that. But someone ingrained that. Because again, the way we grew up, we're just black people. Right. There was grandma looks like a white lady, parents darker, but we're one family. And so adults made differences between us as kids. Yes. Because we didn't know any better until someone told us that there was a difference in our skin tone.
So as it kind of sounds like my mom and my aunt's situation, which I think there's more in depth with that. How do you feel like you two were able to overcome it, or do you feel like you, without all the fighting or being like jealous of each other or putting each other down, like what worked for you all or what didn't work?
We fought a lot because we were compared a lot, but we were very different. I was athletic. She was a singer. I was considered lighter. She was considered darker. But people pointed that out, not us. And so we were probably in our late 20s before we actually had that conversation. Like, what happened? Right. And we talked about it, you know, and where the jealousy might have come and the differences in how others pit us against one another. And we talked about it, and that was the end of it. You know, we've been closer ever since, but we also didn't talk for years, but didn't know why.
Gotcha.
And it's because someone, an adult, planted in our minds that we were different because of the skin tone.
Gotcha.
It just speaks to your experiences can drive a mindset.
We didn't even know why we didn't talk.
Right. And I think that's the key. I think that's part of it with my mom and my aunt, which was my grandmother's only two daughters. And they have the same mother and the same father as well. And I think for my aunt, because she was like my grandmother, my mother's dark light. So my mother clung to my grandfather. My aunt, you know, was with my grandmother. And then when my grandmother passed, I think my aunt felt alone. But it was that division. And now it's just my grandfather. Now I feel like they're fighting over. It's crazy what color and division will do to your family. You know, unfortunate. So for me, I don't want the generational curse.
So for the light-skinned women in the room, do you feel as if you ever had light-skin privilege?
I would say yes, and it's more in the male community. And so I think back to, as a much younger age, the first ask to the dance or whatever, and there would be a very beautiful, competent young lady that could be sitting right there next to me, that they would gravitate to the lighter skinned individuals. And so yes, I have experienced that. As I've grown and aged, I don't see it as much from my own people. I do, however, still experience it to this day in my professional career from the wider community.
So for the darker women, do you feel as if light skin privilege, have you ever been in a situation where it has trumped over your own skin tone because you're darker?
Absolutely. I took advantage of it though. Well, and in college we like to go out and party and hang out and things like that. And so my best friend, very fair skinned, and so the guys would always gravitate to her. And so we used it to our advantage, We were like, this to drink, this to eat, Yeah. So that sounds funny, but I don't know if it ever really hurt my feelings or anything. But absolutely. All the time, actually. But I just have thick skin, so it really doesn't bother me. I'm confident in me and who I am, so it doesn't bother me. But have I had someone to just say, well, you're dark, she's light, so I'm going to? No.
Right.
But I know what's going on.
Right.
So, but again, I really didn't experience that until late teens, going to college type of thing.
I haven't personally experienced it, but I know the beefs on Twitter and Instagram. It's always So I feel like men would always gravitate more towards light skinned than dark skinned women. I personally haven't been affected by it, but it's just out there. It's true.
Yeah, I definitely have not been affected by it per se, and just like my everyday life. I think that a lot of times there are certain situations, so like dating or like in relationships, maybe guys do gravitate more towards, but I think that I frequently get, oh, you're so pretty for a dark skinned girl, and that's what I don't necessarily like, because I think that I'm just pretty.
And you are.
And you're
That's
you're
right.
That's right.
But that's just it. So I think that other than in that situation, I don't necessarily notice that my lighter skinned friends are, being treated differently than I am per se.
I can't say that I've experienced that. What I've experienced is, if I have to have a black person, I'd rather not have any black person, but if I do, okay, we'll take you, more than the color part of it. We just didn't want an African American, period, or woman, period. And so I think probably if, and it's just a hypothetical situation, but if they had to choose between the two and the background experience were the same, that may have been a consideration, but I don't think at the level that some of us in our professions, you black, so I gotta take you. I might as well take you if you're smart, if you have the background, the experience. But I haven't experienced that myself personally.
That's an excellent point. No matter how the privilege is perceived or in the beginning, it all, boils up to you're black in the end.
So darker women usually have the one side of feeling less beautiful compared to a lighter skinned woman, whether that's personal preference from men or just within the community in general. But lighter skinned women, you have two sides. You can have light skin privilege while still receiving discrimination within your own community, right? So have you experienced a sense of not fitting into your community because of how light you are?
Well, you know what? Yes, but not until I went to the South. So I visited the South, and she knows, because my daughter was with me, but I went to the South, and we were with family members who we had just become acquainted with, and they were speaking very ill of their experiences of a Caucasian or with a Caucasian person. And I wasn't even part of the conversation. And they said, but you know what? And they said, was it a white woman? And they said, as white as that gal is right there. And I said, oh, you mean me? Like, oh, and I watched how, and I had to ask my family, did they start treating me differently because of their experience? They associated me with the white woman. I'm like, I didn't even know the woman. I just met you. But it was very real. And, you know, I was well into my 40s before I felt it. Now, I'll say my brother, who is very brown skinned, had always explained situations in which if he and I were together, his friends would say, why you bring your little sister with you? You know, and he would say, yeah, we found her in a dumpster because I didn't fit what his friends thought I should fit. But again, I didn't feel it until in the South, in my 40s, where I found myself defending myself for a situation that I had nothing to do with. Nothing to do with.
So, as I hear everyone's experiences about light skin or dark skin, I hear the differences obviously based upon color, but the experiences of discrimination is still the same. So, I want to show you a clip, right, of this movie called School Days. Pretty sure all of you have seen it. I have not. I just heard about it like a couple days ago. But
That's a classic.
but it is about colorism in sororities, right? And so go ahead, please. So, based on the events in that clip, there were the sorority women called the Gamma Rays, were the slick, light-skinned women who confronted the darker-skinned women for their natural hair and the skin color, right? So, you see that within sororities, and some people might say that this represents the AKAs and the Deltas, mostly back in the day, right? So, the Deltas and the AKAs, do you feel this is a fair representation of how, may not how it is now, but how it was before?
So when I was in undergrad, the AKAs were the girls who looked like me. And the Deltas were the light skin, long hair, good hair on our campus when I was there in the early 80s. And so, and I was initiated in an alumni chapter because I didn't want to be, you know, a Delta, but I thought I wanted to be AKA because they looked like me. And I never met anybody who didn't look like me, you know, so in the sorority, so it's like, well, I don't want to do that. And then when I went to graduate school, then it flip-flopped, you know, it's like, okay, well, now that we look like this, which was very different than growing up and the experience that I had in Mississippi. Then when I came to the Midwest, you know, everything was very different. And so can I say that exists now? I absolutely cannot say that it exists now from my experience. But when I was growing up, it was definitely the paper bag test. And, and not just that, but you had to have long hair too, and so it was very, very different than what I experienced now and what my daughters experienced in their experience as Delta. So,
Where'd you go to undergrad?
Jackson State.
I guess that what bothers me the most about it is that when you look at the history of Greek life, whether fraternity or sorority, we only established our own because we couldn't get in to the white sororities and fraternities. So for us to turn around and to do that paper bag test, it's like you take away from the principles of what we were founded upon. We had to create our own because they wouldn't let us in. And now you're doing this to somebody else to say you can't get in. And then I think that's what bothers me with us just as people. We're so worried about what the other community, how they classify us and look at us and talk about our color when we do it, like you said, amongst ourselves. I'm only 41, so I have no idea why there would have been a paper bag test. Now, of course, I've heard of it, and I have family members that they don't want to talk about it and they say it's not true. I know it's true because I've heard other people, like you said, say it's true. So I don't understand that concept. Like, why did we do that? Why did that happen if we created this form because we couldn't, the white people said we weren't good enough to be in theirs?
Well, if you think about, and Hannah, no doubt, is defining this in her study, but colorism didn't start with us.
That's
Right.
exactly.
It started a long time ago when the
Exactly.
light skin were pitted against the dark skin.
Correct.
And so we have then perpetuated it, unfortunately, because color seems to have some kind of power associated with it. And so we just brought along with us, and some of us haven't been smart enough to say,
Right.
well,
I guess.
Right. We fed into that
fed into
perception.
Right.
because it looked like power.
Right.
Because the light got to work in the kitchen and the dark had to, so we brought all that
Exactly.
stuff over.
Exactly.
So we just recreated what was happening in society because it brings power, unfortunately.
Right. It's tied to that privilege.
Yes.
Back to your question though, my grandmother, so I was raised in Gary, Indiana. My grandmother is actually an AKA. And she's light skinned, very much light skinned. So I grew up, my grandfather's a Catholic, he's light skinned. So I grew up and they were very active in the Alumni Association in chapters in their city. And so that was what I knew, but it was really delicate. So at that point, growing up, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be an AKA because that's what my grandmother is. And as I got to know, it was more about the history for me, but it was no doubt in my mind, if I wanted to be an AK, I would be, even though I don't look like my grandmother. So, that was once again never the situation, and I can looking back over, I had the opportunity to pledge in college. We had some technical difficulties, so I didn't finish that process then. It wasn't until 2004 when I completed my process as far as being a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and so I can look at my 24 line sisters and you see the gamut. So I'm appreciative that that's not the case now. But it very much was. My grandmother pledged at a historically black college, Texas College in Texas, and when you see the pictures of her chapter, it was pretty much all light-skinned women. My grandfather was light-skinned, my mother's dark, and in fact, when my mother married my father, my father called me. My grandmother was like, "Oh, I see you changing the whole family makeup now." I mean, that was the conversation she had with my mother. So I know it happens.
Right.
I mean, my brother, she was like, my brother was born, she's pinching his nose because it was too big. All of that. I mean, I've heard that, but I was just made a conscious decision and I'm not going with that. So.
I think I just want to lift Gwen's point, though, that mindset did not derive from sororities and fraternities. That is a historical, issue that started back when they brought the lighter skinned, slaves in, because that's the one that the masters were with and were having children with and continued on. And then the other piece that I want to lift is when we look at those pictures of any of our organizations, we also have to look at who was being allowed into school back then, because the admission of African Americans would also yielding toward the lighter complexion. And to your point, Gwen, it was because it was a sign of power, and we were perceived as non-threatening, and needed, to your point, and we were probably the ones that were sitting back ready to raise that fist, and they didn't even know to infiltrate.
So, Ms. Gwendolyn, you brought up a good point about the paper bag test. So, back in the day, AKs were allegedly said that you had to pass the paper bag test to become an AKA. And so then the darker skinned women would go to the deltas. So is that true?
So I would like to say I don't believe it's true. I don't remember reading that in any of our history books at all. And we have quite a few history books. I don't remember ever hearing that from any older soror, more seasoned soror at all. Is it in any of y'all's history books at all that you guys had to be darker?
Well, that would never be written down. That's in the unwritten guidelines that we just pass on as traditions. They're not policies and procedures. And I wouldn't say that they were true or not true. Back in the day, they may have been true, but certainly it wouldn't be something that anybody would carefully articulate in writing.
Right. Okay. So y'all all have a piece of paper, right? That we told you not to flip over, but we're going to go ahead and flip that over right now. Okay? So this is an article that I found that yes, in 1928, and it is an article about colorism within the sororities and specifically on the paper bag test. So I'm going to read the article, and it's highlighted what I'm going to read. So, ever and anon, rumors and reports come out of our colleges and institutes that color prejudice is in evidence and color discrimination practice. Writing in the Hilltop, a campus publication, the student Edward H. Taylor alleges that the Greek letter organizations are behind the movement which results in splitting up various classes into groups of different shades, yellow, brown, and black. According to this young man, the light-skinned students are sought after by the fraternities and sororities, particularly the latter, as members, and the darker ones pass by. The darker brown students then form their own cliques while the blacks are left in the cold. Negroes, young and old, everywhere in the world today, and particularly in the United States, have got to clearly understand that whatever the graduations of color in the group, they are all Negroes. We hope this charge against the fraternities and sororities at Howard University is not true, although this is not the first time it has been heard of. So, Allie, to your point, and the fact that you said it wouldn't be documented, I do believe that is true. And honestly, I don't really know too much about Greek life, but I do believe that the paper bag test, not just within sororities, but it was implemented in any institution, whether it was white people doing it or the fact that black people were doing it to their own skin color people. So we acknowledge the differences that have happened back then and what is to become now. So within your own sororities, have you had any instances where back in the day you have heard other people, your older sorors, saying that they have felt discrimination, or have you felt like you have felt any discrimination within your own sorority?
You know, not at all. I go to Indiana University, and tall chapter is huge, and there are so many women ranging from light skin to dark skin. I have never once heard or even seen anyone be discriminated against because of the color of their skin. So I don't know. Whenever I just hear stuff like that, it's like the first sentence says rumors and reports. So I mean, it's just your opinion.
So the first I heard of the paper bag test was by actually my grandmother, non-Greek, very little education. And so, again, I don't know that anyone can clearly state that something did or did not occur. But I will say that from my experiences, even in talking with older sorors in our organization, we've always been so cognizant of what could pull us all apart that we take it, you know, in all of our organizations, we do everything we can to uplift. It's almost just our values in any of our organizations seem to be, you know, in defense of this type of propaganda that's out there. Not to say that it didn't occur. Again, we talked earlier about in slavery, you had the lighter complected slaves brought into the home. And so that it existed. It's a part of our history, you know, as people. But from what I know of my organization and every other beautiful and wonderful organization at this table, it's our purpose and values that we, continue to uplift one another and dispel this type of act and rumor.
Yeah, I would say that the things that may cause confusion or division or angst in our sororities aren't color. In 2019, in fact, we embrace every single sister, regardless of her skin tone. Those aren't the things that we, as women probably deal with in this age. That might still be happening. I can't imagine that it is, because the things that we have amongst women are so petty and so different, so big, that we focus on those things, and certainly not, in my opinion, the color aspect of all the richness that we all bring.
And I mean, to add on to that, I know that in our sorority we have, people of all ethnicities. So it's not just Black women. I mean, historically, yes, it has been, but we have, international and international region. So it's not just Black women, not just light skinned women, not just dark skinned women, but we have a little bit of everybody.
I agree. So Megan Monroe is the same.
And I think I'm appreciative for this conversation, because I can honestly say I probably never have had the conversation of colorism. And just as soon as I've not had this conversation, there are people who still probably subscribe to this and may not be open, but in conversations, they're having it like, I can think back to probably some conversations with my family, like, I don't want you bringing somebody home who can't use my comb. That kind of stuff. Those kind of things. So it's still there. So to be aware and acknowledge, we've got to meet people where they are and understand that this may be a factor in somebody's mind. They may not be open with it, but they'll say it. So we need to be aware of just the different biases that we have.
So looking at colorism within sororities and colorism amongst women in general, what do you think that the African American community as a whole can do to end the cycle of colorism?
I think that a lot like Miss Nita has said, just be yourself and just be loving and open to dark skin, light skin. It doesn't really matter. It's just like seeing kids on a playground. Everybody's playing with everybody.
Yes.
They literally don't know that little, Daquan over here is not Frank's, equal per se. Everybody's the exact same. So I think that just looking at everybody and just taking them for how they are and who they are and loving them regardless.
I think it starts in the home.
Yes.
How you're raised and what you hear and what you see around your children and those kinds of things, even in the Black churches. What are they being taught in church? What are they being taught in school about colorism and things like that? So, but I really think it starts at home. Being careful as the parent, as the adult, with what you say and what you're teaching. Yeah.
I think creating opportunities like this for conversation, safe space, because there's somebody who still believes that and they need to be persuaded. Why not?
Right.
But if you're around a circle of your sisters, then
Say it again.
a circle of your sisters, then hopefully you can say it and they can check you in love, and not because but it also takes people not to have group think, because typically you'll be around the people who feel the same way. So if you diversify the people that you're in friends with, and will take it as, I just want to make you better. We have problems. We have bigger issues than whether we're light skinned or dark skinned, or whether, we have just larger issues, and that perpetuates among our kids and relationships. And so if we can have safe spaces like this where we have the conversation and you feel comfortable, I don't know if I have, but maybe I did, to have that. I think that would be instrumental in making some changes, because we still have work to do. It's so much work to do.
And continue to advance as a people. So the opportunities that you speak of, I can better provide opportunities to my sisters if I'm in a position in which I can do so. So starting at home, starting with self, being, honest and upfront with your own insecurities and your own experiences, but creating habits of opportunity for everyone around you.
on top of that, just use social media as a platform as well.
Look at the young kids. See there.
They're just like embrace like your differences and embrace beauty and like you said, like tell personal stories.
I actually want to start a hashtag for this.
Yeah,
You absolutely should.
I'm
sure.
Join with the Melanin Girl Club.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, so I really do thank you all for coming and supporting me with my capstone. And for those who are watching, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to give me as much feedback as you can. And let's make the beginning to a new wave against colorism.